Hello everyone, and welcome to my first episode of my new series, which is my Tamers Retrospective series. So this time, obviously, I'll be covering episode 1 of Digimon Tamers, which is Guilmon is Born, the Digimon that I created. But before I get started, I just want to go through a bit of housekeeping first. So I'm only watching the Japanese version without any subtitles, so I won't be comparing the English dub and the English subbed version. But I actually did cover that on the show 5 years ago, and all those podcast episodes are actually available on this channel. So if you do want to hear me comparing the differences between the English dub and the English sub, you can just listen to those. Obviously, while my thoughts on how I enjoy a series and any discussion points that I have may have changed in 5 years, the actual differences between the English dub and the English sub won't have changed at all. So I won't be covering that. If there's something that comes up that I feel is a big enough change, I might mention it as a side discussion point, but I won't be going through every single difference that each version has. Only ones that really either I remember being a big deal or just things that I want to talk about, but I won't be going through each point of difference that's there. So yeah, but that's all available on the channel anyway, so you're more than welcome to check those out if you do. I still think that they're quite decent. I like the comparisons that we made, so they're still there, so definitely check those out. And in terms of the format for this retrospective series, it'll basically be a rough outline of what happened in the episode, so a bit of a synopsis, just because you may not want to actually watch each episode side by side with my analysis. So I'll be giving a bit of a rundown and synopsis of each episode, and then once I'm done with that, I'll be going through all my thoughts on the episodes, as well as giving it a rating out of 5. I'll be aiming for each episode to be around 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes at most, so they're really bite-sized in comparison to a podcast, which is usually around maybe an hour and a half on average. So they'll be a lot shorter than my actual podcast. Again, if you want to check out the podcasts, you're more than welcome to, especially if you're interested in knowing the differences between the English dub and English sub versions. So hopefully in this retrospective series, I'll be able to notice things and discuss things that maybe I haven't thought of or noticed or mentioned in previous viewings. So I guess with that out of the way, let's begin. So as I said, episode 1 is Guilmon is Born, the Digimon that I created, and the overall synopsis is that a young boy named Ricardo is playing the Digimon card game with his friend Kazu, but when he hurriedly leaves to head to his class, he discovers an unfamiliar blue card amongst all of his other Digimon cards. He then scans it with his card reader, and then it appears to sort of malfunction, and then he's like, oh, I don't know what happened there, but anyway, he rushed to class, and he then starts to design his own Digimon, who is Guilmon, and he does this in a notebook. That night, when he realises that the card reader that he slashed with the blue card that he found earlier has transformed into a Digivice, he then attempts to scan his notebook where he drew and designed this Digimon of his own, and it doesn't quite fit and it gets stuck. However, when he leaves it on the table, the Digivice is able to scan these drawings, and an egg is created on the Digivice. He then falls asleep holding the Digivice, but has a dream of Renamon fighting a Lynxmon. The next day, Takada realises that the egg is hatched, and follows directions from the Digivice, which lead him to Guilmon, who is alive, well, and blowing up rats. So, to my thoughts, and that was a little, as I said, bite-sized synopsis, just so you don't have to watch the episodes side by side and all the retrospective videos. I aim to be bite-sized synopsises like that. Anyway, so on to my thoughts. This was kind of a slow start to the show, so the main character doesn't actually meet his Digimon until episode 2. And this episode really has a fantastic way of introducing the viewers to the series. There are no, connections to any other series that you need to know. There's no connections to Adventure, and you wouldn't need knowledge of any other piece of the franchise. You could just watch this without any knowledge of Digimon at all. It does a pretty good job of saying that, hey, it's a card game, they're a Digimon, they're digital monsters, and it kind of starts with not necessarily you needing to know anything about the franchise or any rules. And of course we have this first scene, which is probably one of my favourite scenes in all of Digimon, where we get these two Digimon fighting. It's like the opening scene. And we find out that these two Digimon fighting are actually the result of the card game that the main character is playing. And it's sort of happening in its own digital space. And that's kind of a nice touch. It sort of shows that this is the link between the Digimon franchise that's in the show and the actual Digimon that are fighting. And that's a really cute little tie-in there. And this whole, and this first scene makes, and I guess the whole series in general, really makes this show feel like a love letter to the franchise. And that's a really nice way to start it. I know that when I first watched Tamers as a kid, I wasn't really fond of it, and I remember revisiting it a couple of years later, and I think I watched the first handful of episodes in the dub, and I was just like, oh, I don't like this at all. But then when I actually went to rewatch it later on, I was like, oh, okay, it's better. So it didn't really draw me in as a kid as much as it did for some. But, and I've always said that Tamers is fairly overrated as a season of Digimon, but it's probably one of the best seasons of Digimon, but it's definitely overrated. But anyway, I just love how it feels like a love letter to the show, and it's definitely one of my main takeaways from the first episode is this is such a nice way of introducing your characters and your world without requiring and nobody needs to know about any other season of Digimon. You don't need to know about even the card game, even though it does have cards from the actual real-life card game that came out back in the first season. You don't actually need to know how the game is played. You don't need to know much about the mechanics because the show is actually going to tell you about how Digimon evolve and the different stages that Digimon have, as well as obviously the Digimon names themselves. And that's a really nice little touch. And in comparison with the 2 seasons prior to Tamers, we don't meet every single character in episode 1, and we don't meet every single Digimon in episode 1. So you get a better grasp of the characters' personalities. We only really meet Takato in this episode. While we do see other characters, Takato is the one we're meeting, and we kind of see Guilmon. We don't actually meet Guilmon until next episode. So it's a bit of a slower introduction to this series. While the first episode of Adventure, you're meeting 7 kids, you're meeting their 7 in-training Digimon, and then you're meeting their 7 children Digimon when they evolve from their in-training forms, and then you meet Kawagamon. So a whole bunch of things that you're learning in the first episode. In this episode you meet Takato, and you kind of meet a few characters. You don't really know anything about them, you kind of know more about Takato and his interactions with the world. You know, he likes the Digimon card game, he plays it with his friends, he goes to school, he lives above a bread shop. His parents own a bakery. And that's about it, and he has some friends at school, but you don't really need to know much about his friends yet. So that's a nice sort of introduction, rather than just meeting all the characters, which the first episode of Adventure is just meeting characters. That's all you're doing. This one is you're meeting more of the world, not the actual characters. You meet one character and you're introduced to the world that Takato lives in. In terms of Takato as a character, he's honestly up there with Haru from Appmon as one of my favourite Golga kids. He's not like a violent, hot-headed jock like a lot of the other Golga kids are. He's a bit of a geek, and so far he seems fairly genuine and kind as a character. He's a friendly little kid, it's nice. Something I want to touch on, and I hope to touch on this in a later episode if I remember, as of this recording, I've watched the first 7 episodes and I've kind of written down my very basic notes. I need to go through and really establish them a bit more before I record those videos. But anyway, something I hope to touch on is that Takato is actually the last of the 3 to get his Digivice in Digimon, which has something that is in common with one of my other favourite seasons of Digimon, which is Digimon Savers. So in Digimon Savers, Masaru gets his Digivice in Digimon, but we learn that the other characters have already all got their Digivices already, so that's fine. And another thing I want to touch on just before I really finish up is that the music is just incredible for setting up the atmosphere. It's got like this nice like bit of mystery as well as adventure that plays in the background, and it's a really nice way of setting up that atmosphere. And then one last point that I want to finish off on is, and this is a question I've had since I was a kid, and it's never explained, but I just really want to finish off on this, is that how is Takato able to like astrally project himself to watch Ruki's battle? because he never does that again, and it's never really, he mentions it like when he first talks to Ruki, and especially more in the English dub, but he sort of says, hey, I dreamt of you, and Ruki's like, that's weird, because it is weird. And it's never touched on again that he's able to, like, astrally project himself and watch this battle in his sleep, and he never does it again. So, and, I mean, I'm assuming that it's actually happening, and it's not just he saw Ruki and it didn't just connect two things together, because when he sees Ruki, he's like, hey, I remember you from my dream. He doesn't say, I remember you from the Digimon contest or something. And it is never explained. I don't know why it's never explained, but it is a kind of a weird thing, and it's never touched on. And I just wish it was. And that's just a question I've always had. I just wish I knew what caused it. But anyway, so that was my first Tamers retrospective series. Let me know what you think. Obviously, like, this one's a little bit longer than my other ones because it did have that housekeeping bit at the start. And it's a little bit different to what I'm used to. I'm used to the podcasts where I'm sort of bouncing back and forth with someone else who's also watched the episode, and I'm having like a conversation. This one's really just me screaming about my thoughts. And just to finish off, before I thank you for watching, and I hope that this was an okay episode, is that my overall ranking for the first episode of Digimon Tamers was 3 out of 5. It's a fine way to start a show. As I mentioned, it's a nice way to introduce the concepts of the show before we meet every single member of the cast. We only really meet Decado, and it's a nice way to set the show and set sort of like the scene in terms of how this series is going to progress, what universe we live in, how Digimon exists in this world. It's a card game, it's a franchise, much like it is in real life, except for if I scan a Digimon I've created in a Digivice, it's not going to make me a real Digimon, which is upsetting. But anyway, so thanks for watching this video, and let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next one. Yes, thanks for watching. Bye! Oh, my green screen just went up. Oh, there it's back again. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye!